Welcome to the Consultant's Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMann and Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultant's Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMann and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome to the Consultant's Way podcast. Anthony Paluska, Dean McMann, and today we are joined by Margarita Ginsberg. Margarita, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Excited to talk about it. So, Margarita, I want to dive into a big topic that is top of mind for a bunch of people that we're talking to these days. It's the age-old problem, but I think it's an even more significant problem today. And what that is we've just been doing a research study on a bunch of PS organizations, and 85% of PS organizations have been tasked with a significant increase in their growth target in the past 2 years. And the primary source for a lot of PS revenue comes from sales. And so what I want to dive into with you today is the integration and making sure that sales and PS play nicely together so that everybody wins in a situation like that. So I'm excited to talk about that topic. But before we dive into the specifics of that, Margaret, give us and the audience a little bit of your background and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to bore you with the 15 years ago, that whole story, but I started my career in finance, learning my way around a P&L. I have a background in finance from my undergrad, did that for a little while where I stumbled upon doing project work and was like, I like this. I should go do more of that. So I pivoted to a team doing some business IT stuff, and then I found some other things I liked. I'm like, I should go do that. And I kind of bounced between roles to figure out that I really, really enjoy doing consulting or professional services type work. And that's where I've been for the last, call it 5 to 10 years in between different roles doing consulting type work. So
Great. Working at a variety of different organizations and playing the role that we're going to talk about today, which is being on the PS side of the equation and trying to form and drive alignment with sales in order to increase all of our revenue and the number of projects that we can work on. So with that as a bit of a backdrop, Margarita, we'll start kind of with a wide open question here. What are some of the most common challenges that you've seen and experienced when trying to get PS and sales, right, sometimes oil and water, to align?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is obviously the sales organization is there to drive revenue, sell licenses, and PS sometimes is an afterthought, right? So it's let's close the deal, let's get her done, and then we'll figure out the PS part of it later. And that can be problematic in a lot of ways. Number one is, you sell something to a customer and they expect it to work, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you need X amount of professional services dollars. Like, what? We didn't budget for that. And you start losing, eroding trust that the customer has in you, in your organization, and the sales team. And then the professional services team can be left to clean that up, which is never how you want to jump into your relationship with a customer of, yeah, I know the other guy said this, but actually we're going to have a lot more work in front of us, right? So that's a very common thing. Or, the sales team does say something where, yes, you're going to need a little bit of consulting budget, but they don't fully scope it out because they have a quota to hit. Let's be real, right? It's not like it's a intentional deception or anything like that. They want to make sure that they can close the deal. They want to get the customer signed on, and then they figure, once the customer has already committed, they're going to do what it takes to get onboarded, right? And that's not necessarily the best approach, in my opinion. So I've seen it a couple different ways. That is what I just talked about, was kind of one of the big pitfalls of what I've seen. And then even after the deal is closed, do you pivot to professional services? Do you go to a customer success model? Like what happens next? So
do you think the real, let's have some a modicum, not much empathy for sales. I don't want to go crazy here, but
Yeah.
often they just view the whole PS conversation as too complex and slows down the deal.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of different roles, from the pre-sale side. So, you've got your sales engineers that come in, they do beautiful demos and art of the possible, and they sell the vision. Then you've got the sales folks that come in and they sell the licensing and the product. And then ideally, you interject that with this is your professional services team. They're going to help get you onboarded, teach you how to use the tool, get you set up. There should be a budget allocated for that. If there isn't, somebody's going to have to pick up that slack, whether PS eats the cost in an organization or sales figures out some sort of something, or the customer winds up paying for it and then they might be upset about it because you didn't forewarn them, right? If that could happen. And then somewhere along the lines after that, you bring in your customer success folks to make sure that once you've established yourself, it's kind of like PS builds your house and then customer success helps you live in it, right? So you've got your sales people, that's your realtor, they're going to help you get your house. And then your PS organization helps you build it. And then someone else helps you live in it.
That's a great analogy. That's great. We're going to lift that and use that. I like it.
Sure.
So what are some of the ways you can begin? And I think what you've described, by the way, is classic. We all deal with it. It's not a surprise to anybody. But what are some of the things you've done? I know you have great relationships. You have a history of great relationships with the sales organization. What are some of the things that can be done to head this off?
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think having the relationship and the rapport is the most important thing you could possibly do. I like to set up virtual coffees if we're in a remote world. A lot of times I know a lot of places are returning to office, so if you can be in office, great. Grab a in-person cup of coffee. If not, grab a virtual cup of coffee and get to know the sales team that you're working with, get to know the account, and make sure that you're in it together. At the end of the day, you're on the same team, and just making sure that everybody is in alignment with that, right? Like as a professional services professional, right? My job is not to slow down the deal. My job is to make sure when you sell that deal that it's going to be successful. And that's at the end of the day what we all want.
Yeah, so let's take one of those kind of examples. What's an ideal time and way to get professional services involved in an opportunity? And I know every product and every organization has a little bit different thing there, but are there some best practices or some rules that you have as suggestions for the sales team and the PS teams out there listening okay, sometimes we hear them say, bring PSs in as early as possible. And then PS gets upset because they're brought into deals that aren't qualified appropriately, and PS feels like they're doing some of the selling work, right? And then the other situation, like you described earlier, is sales will sell something and then throw it over the fence to PS to then have to go in and resell the opportunity because they weren't involved to help scope it and refine it. And so is there a sweet spot there? Are there is there a framework there that you'd think about using for when to bring professional services into an opportunity?
Yeah, I think the sooner the better. I know people get upset if you're brought in too early. I'd rather be brought in too early than too late. It's easier, I'd rather mumble and grumble and say, man, that was a waste of my time, than have to then pick up the pieces when the customer is already upset, and then you gotta re-energize them and get them excited again. Like I'd much rather be brought in from the get-go. And I've seen that work successfully. The lines do get blurred a little bit because then it's, well, you've got your pre-sales engineer, you've got your sales team, you've got professional services. Who really owns the account? And, you got to make that call, right? Case by case. But I think the sooner the better, because then everyone's on the same page. Nobody's playing telephone, nobody's playing catch up, and you know what the end goal is and you know how you're going to get there. And you know what? If it was an unqualified opportunity and nothing happens, say la vie.
Well, it's good experience too for the PS people. It's just good experience. One thing we did, I ran a large tech firm. I admit it. I ran a large tech firm at one time. And one thing, because I came from PS, one thing I did right away is PS has to approve all contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Amazingly, they were then involved. Yeah. Some of the deals aren't going to close unless PS signs. Amazingly, PS is always involved now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen things where, like we just talked about, PS is brought in earlier, PS is brought in later. You could have things where it's mandated from the top down, where the entire leadership is saying, hey, you two work together, like figure it out, work together, play nice. You're in it to win it, right? So there's that way. Then there's the, somebody, boots on the ground saying we all need to work together, and then you go bottom up, right? There's different approaches. It depends on the organization, and it depends on the team. But I think as long as everyone is, communicating and working together, then that's how you can have the most success.
I know we'll move on from this, but this is a fascinating nuance for me. But one thing I'm still surprised about is companies that buy software that don't already know you will always need PS.
Oh, yeah.
If you've implemented software in any complexity, you know you need PS. So that people are still surprised and upset, regardless of the sales process. I'm just amazed by that. It just never happens that you can change your business and bring in technology without some help.
I think that where it can get interesting is if you have like a line item in your contract when you're selling licensing, if it's kind of prepaid, right? So the customer goes in, they already know it's baked in to what they're paying for, and they know they're going to need to work with professional services. There are some vendors that do that, and then there are some vendors that don't. And when you don't, then it becomes a little bit more of a, well, we'll figure this out ourselves, or we'll just hire somebody to do this all for us. And they tend to crash and burn a little bit, but then they call you and then you're playing cleanup, right? And that's never the place you want to come from. You want to come from the position of, all right, we're going to implement something brand new. Like, let's get this right from the first try and make it work really well for you, right? Like, you bought the product for a reason. So you want it to work. You want it to work well. Let's just get it right the first time upon setup, right? Or sometimes, maybe it's not a sales deal like a brand new customer, a new logo, but maybe it's you're expanding to a different business unit, or maybe it's within the same unit and you're just expanding your user base and now you need to implement a new part of the tool or something, right? And there's a lot of variations of what you can do there. But
yeah, one of the things you talked about a little bit earlier was kind of around role clarity, and that being part of the challenge of all of this, which is, okay, well, at what stage is somebody involved? And we can talk about incentives as well, because that creates some of the disconnect here. But I'm just going to describe a couple of common models. And if you've worked in any of these, talk to kind of maybe pros and cons for the ones that you'd suggest or recommend that work the best. Or if there's a different one that I don't reference here, call it out. But there's a model, and I'm going to call it the completely sales-led model, where PS productizes all of its offers. Maybe it's embedded as part of a line item already in the product sale, and it just gets included in there, and PS is on the receiving end of it, but we put the right guardrails in place in the contract so that we at least receive something that we can deliver on. There's another model, which is you've got your solution engineers or your sales architects that exist on the sales team, but they might have come out of PS, or they actually might have a foot in both sales and the delivery camp, so that they're trying to bridge some of that gap, and that's a way to do some of that for some custom scoping. I've seen salespeople that are PS salespeople that live in the PS organization that partner up with the sales team for complex deals, and they go and they're doing scoping and selling and positioning and trying to make all of that work. Then you have the partner-led model within PS team, where they're sales delivery, but they run a practice, and those are the people that get brought. And then you have others where PS will just grab a consultant and say, I need your help on this particular deal because you're in my territory. And that's how they get involved. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different models there. There's many others that I didn't even talk about. Have you seen one work better, worse? Any recommendations or suggestions there about the structure of how PS supports the sales organization?
I think I've seen a few of those models. I think that from whether you do like PS from an internal perspective or whether you go partner led, that depends on your business strategy and how you want to do it, right? I think there are some organizations where partner led model has been very, very successful. And I think there are some times where it might be more of a struggle if you're transitioning from one to another. It just depends on what your business goals are. If you want to have like an in-house PS organization, or if you want to have that not be a part of what you do, right? Maybe you have like the very niche like expertise in-house, and then 90% of it can be handled by a partner, right? That works. Being pulled in when it's somebody in your BU, like your business unit, may or may not be the best thing, because maybe somebody that's not their expertise, or maybe, so I think where I've seen having almost like an somebody that's on top, that sits on top of all of it, that knows what the skill sets are of each consultant, they'll say, oh, I need help with SDK scoping, and they pull from that group of folks that have that particular skill set, right? And then that's how you could get the best estimate, right? Like you try to pull somebody in that has never seen a capability or a tool, and they're going to throw a number at you, and you're like, cool, great. And they're making it up, so nobody would actually ever do that, hopefully. But I think the best thing to do, from what I've seen really work, is have folks that are specialists in something, and those are the ones that you pull in for the different scoping items.
Yeah. So then, right, and it's a good point. It's sometimes a misconception, I think, from our sales counterparts or anybody that exists outside of PS. It's not just sales, which is, hey, professional services. I can bring in a professional services consultant, and they can help me with this problem because it's a PS opportunity. But to your point, right, we have different specializations, different areas of expertise. And depending on the needs of the deal, we might need 2 or 3 different people from the PS organization to help appropriately scope and craft this opportunity. Well, who's on point for that from the sales perspective, from the PS perspective? Who's making the right decision as to who to bring into those? Because unlike some of the sales organizations, that team is not organized either geographically or by customer segment. It's by topical area of expertise. So how do we make sure everybody's aware of that so that it can all be seamless, and we can still build those relationships with sales, so that I bring in somebody I've never worked with, but they're an expert on this topic. I still need to be able to trust them, because there needs to be some sort of standard way that PS operates and interacts with sales. So I think it's a great point to call out there, because it's a difference in how we operate and structure our PS business than how the sales team operates. And so it's not quite one-to-one.
Yeah, I will say that was probably in a recent role, is probably my favorite part of my job, is being the person that the sales team can go to and say, hey, I'm working on a customer and they have these 3 things that I need to scope out. Who do I need for that, right? Like, I'm not the expert, right? But I know who to call. So I'll say, all right, maybe this one person can handle items 1 and 2, but you're going to need a different skill set for number 3, right? And then we can either get them all in a room all together at once, or we could have different working sessions. But that's something I love doing, is connecting the people that need to be in the room to help make the sales successful.
What would you say is a reasonable amount of percent of time in a PS organization to be invested in sales?
I think it depends on are you like a professional services organization that has quota attached to your marker, right? So if I'm being held accountable for, a number, then a lot more time, right? Because if I'm part of the sales cycle, I know I'll be able to sell more deals if I'm attached to deals that the sales team is working on, right? Then there's also growing your own professionals, like your own sales within existing customers, right? So I know, let's say I'm responsible for, 15 customers in my business unit. I know these are the ones that, there's maybe 5 that have something where I might be able to, sell them a little bit more work, for example, right? They have some problems and I'm going to try to help them fix those problems, right? You can grow that way. You can grow through work with your sales team to help you grow that way. And then also somewhere in there, you have to balance making sure your customer is happy and building their relationship and building their rapport, right? So you asked me percentage. I'm going to go with if you have quota in your goals, then I would say 75% should probably be sent selling, and then 25% should be nurturing those relationships and making sure that, sometimes you hear something like, man, I'm having trouble with this, and it's not a complaint at maybe it's not even related to your product, but it's something your product can handle, and that becomes an opportunity where you might be able to help, right, and sell more services.
So if someone came to you, go ahead, Anthony.
No, go for it.
Came to you and said, "I know the perfect way to do this." What would be your initial reaction?
Let's hear it. I want. I'm all in. Let's hear it.
Let's get them on the show. We'll all talk about it.
So much better answer than they're full of dung. So I like that.
I mean, I'm open to it. If someone's found the magic bullet, then let's all learn from it and all take something from it and do better. And I don't think that there's going to be one solution that works for every organization, but there's probably bits and pieces that people can take and, apply to their use cases in their organization.
Yeah, I would think that. I love that you say, that we've got to understand the organization and everything. Probably, if we had our druthers, and if you're not familiar with that term, then I apologize. There are types of PS firms, or there are type of SaaS firms or product companies, and there are probably 4 or 5 models that are optimal for each one. But because we are stepchildren, that's not studied.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the flexibility and as several people have said on our program, it's PS's job to build those relationships, as you said. It's PS's job to solve the problem because really no one else in the organization is as motivated to solve it as they are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the most important thing that I think we need to hammer more in every organization is that we are all a team. We are literally all here with one goal, and that's to further the organization's mission, whether it be ultimately solve more problems, right? That's hopefully why you're selling your product, not just selling just for the sake of selling, but both, all the sales team, the pre-sales team, consulting, everyone has to work together. That's the most important thing.
Well, I like Dean just said, right? There's a bunch of different models here, and as you've alluded to, right? The right fit and the perfect fit for every organization is unique to that organization, right? There's not a one size fits all approach, and it's also dynamic because as your customer needs change, as your organization changes, as your product and your portfolio mix change, you probably have to. This is one thing that has to continue to be worked on and tweaked. You can't just put a framework in place and say we've got this all figured out. But with all that said, I'm going to ask you to try and put a couple of kind of key takeaways in place here. So if there were a couple of suggestions that you would make to a PS leader, a PS team, a sales team out there, what would a couple of those suggestions be that would help drive some tighter alignment across these two functions and help accomplish the attitude of, hey, we're all a team here, right?
Yeah, so I think my message would be if you're in sales, bring in PS early. And if you're in PS, lean into the relationship with your sales folks. Don't wait for the baton to be passed. Just, like I said, you're in it to win it. Stick together and, make magic happen.
Well, as we begin to close, first of all, great to see you. Wonderful to get your advice. But you were kind enough to share with us earlier some important milestones in your life. Are you a big horse rider? Has there been a case in your life where you were surprised by a horse that might need to be ridden?
Yes, I am actually afraid of horses. And when my now husband proposed to me, I told my mom, we're getting married in Costa Rica. And she's like, you need to enter on a horse. I'm like, I what? And she's like, I think you should come in on a horse. And I was like, I don't know where you want me to find a horse in Costa Rica, Mom. We're going to be on a beach. I don't know what you're talking about. And so a year later, I'm getting my hair done, getting all prepped. And one of my bridesmaids runs in and she's like, out of breath, I found a horse. I was like, what do you mean you found a horse? And she's like, I was on the beach and there was a man and there was a horse. And I'm like, all right, well, guess I'm riding in on a horse. So I rode in on a horse in my big princess gown. So thanks so much, Dean, for
Yeah, I just want you to know you have literally won best story of the year on the podcast. Listen, so happy you came. Anything you want to end with, Anthony, before we say just thanks?
No, and unless Margarita, you can make some great analogy connecting that horror story and experience to the sales PS relationship, then
Oh, I can.
oh yes, I can't wait. Let's go.
Flexible and adaptable, and she did it anyway. Even though it's the wedding's supposed to be all about the bride, she went ahead and rode the horse. All right, thank you, Margarita. Thank you so much for all your advice.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, as I kick the conversation off with the topic of sales and PS integration in alignment and everybody rowing in the same direction is such a topic right now, both because of the growth that is occurring in PS and the pressure on PS to grow, but also on the all the challenges that have always existed of PS being on the receiving end of something that gets sold, and when do they get pulled into the process? There's always this tug of war going on where PS feels like they should and could add more value to a sales conversation, and because of role clarity and incentives and all sorts of stuff, there's a challenge here. So I think Margarita did a great job giving everybody some best practices and some different frameworks to think about as we do that. So I'm glad we got to dive into the topic. It's we probably could have spent a lot more time just on this.
Yeah, I really like that she puts the responsibility, she makes it human. Responsibilities, PS leadership, and they need to build relationships. And those relationships can trump complexity in the organization, complexity in the deal, complexity in the comp plans. So instead of solving each minor piece, she's found a way to bridge all the complexity. Also, I like that she said it's different for every organization how you solve it. So yeah. And what a delightful person.
Oh yeah, no, it was a great conversation. Great story at the end there. I knew you were going to try and weave that in somehow. So I'm glad that worked out. But no, I've seen a lot lately of organizations probably actually taking it so much to an extreme to try and solve this problem, right? Restructuring their entire PS organization to add PS sellers that are organized geographically so that they can build a direct relationship with the sales team in that particular region and be the conduit to support bringing in professional services more frequently and work some of those relationships. And in some cases that is valuable and maybe even necessary, but that's a big change. But I think kind of Margarita's point, and a lot of other people that we've had on recently, the point in the conversation is like PS can't just assume that whether it's sales or any other function is going to understand what PS needs and understand how to get PS involved and do all this. Professional services has to own the responsibility of making it easier for all the other functions to get them involved at the right time and to be aware of the value that professional services can add. Right? And I think that mindset cascades through so many different decisions that happen related to professional services. Is our lives get so much easier if we're running a PS business if we just accept that a good majority of our job as a leader is educating the rest of the organization on what we do, how we can help, and making it as easy as possible on them to work with us.
Yeah. And in some cases using stories, in some cases using data. We have to, but we own educating. We own educating.
That's right.
All right. Well, she was wonderful, and we look forward to seeing her again.
Yeah. No, if you enjoyed this and want to hear more like this, go to YouTube, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe, download, do all of those wonderful things. If you want to connect with Dean or myself, check us out on our LinkedIn pages, or you can always email the show at podcast@consultantsway.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.